And good morning, everybody. We are live. Congratulations, you made it through the week. Glad you're here. Pull up a chair. We're going to talk a little bit about some food safety and food quality today. My name is Bryan Armentrout with the Food Leadership Group. And if you're new to the Food Safety Chat, first off, welcome. We're really glad that you're here and then you're investing the time to improve your knowledge around this and help build your career. So every week at this time on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitter, we go live and we talk about a food safety topic. And this is really fun because I get to bring on an expert and get their perspective, and we get to talk with them and ask questions. And what you'll notice here, as Ryan knows very well, good morning, Ryan, is that this is not a presentation. This is a discussion around a particular topic. And I'm always very excited to bring on guests for the show, and especially new ones with new perspectives. So today, very happy to have Dr. Joe DeFeo with the Juran.com. And he's the chairman and executive advisor with that group. So Joe, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you, Bryan, for inviting me, and I'm looking forward to our chat.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So we were talking a little bit here before we got on the air. And so I'm in Colorado and it's just right around freezing here. And I think they said we're getting some snow tonight. Probably not a whole lot, but a little bit. And you said you're in Massachusetts?
Yeah, I'm in Massachusetts and I'm on the coast and it's about 45 degrees outside, but we were supposed to get like 75 today, but somehow that didn't quite.
Not gonna do it.
I'm visiting. I'm from Connecticut and I lived here and I live there. I live there now, so I'm just visiting up here, but bright sunny day though.
Nice. Yeah. We'll take what we can get, especially, I mean, this time of year in Colorado, it's very unpredictable. March is our snowiest month, and then that kind of rolls over into April. And so a lot of times you will get snowstorms that are late in the year and the trees have started getting their leaves and it just causes all kinds of damage. So hopefully, fingers crossed, nothing happens like that. Yeah. Good morning, Megan. Nice to see you. And of course, Tim is able to join us this week. Glad to have you back, Tim. So Camilla, wow, we got, Argentina. Wow, how awesome is that? Very cool. So one of the things,
and back. Argentina.
So one of the things, Joe, that you'll see on this is we get people from all over the world who join this chat, which is super fun. I love that we're able to do that. So one of the things that always happens during this chat, and I always want to jump into our topics and get going, is I'll skip over our favorite beverage with everybody. So grab your favorite mug, grab your beverage, depending on where you are in the world, and join us for a sip. Cheers, everybody.
Saluta.
Salute. Kompai, the good old, I like the Japanese version of that. Wow, Australia. Lots of new people here today. Very exciting. Cheryl and Kim are here. So because you're new to the show, why don't you give us a little bit of your background, Joe? You have an amazing website, Juran.com, Juran, which is really super cool. And on your website, you've written what, 4 books?
Yeah, so I'll explain how I got to those. So the Juran name is the name Dr. Joseph Juran, founded by Dr. Juran. And Dr. Juran was associated in the same vein as Dr. Deming. You always hear Deming and Juran in regards to quality in Japan and America and around the world. So this is his organization that he founded. And I joined them in 1988 and as a rookie, and worked my way through the system there. And we had a great plan for employee ownership, and I became the employee that ended up surviving all the others. Dr. Juran stuck around till 103.
Wow, I didn't know that.
That was already 15 years ago, and I've been there 35 years. And recently we merged. We were acquired by a company called Attain Partners out of Washington, D.C., which, interesting, was a past client who left being a client and started a business 10 years ago. And we always said we'd like to work together. So we merged, and they do higher education and non-for-profit, and we're a for-profit. So we fit really well in terms of you. I have been in the management of quality as a trainer consultant. I started as a high school teacher way back when, and then I was a technical instructor, and most of my experience in food safety came through Juran Institute, working with various companies, whether it was snacks, baked goods, breads, potatoes, farming, sauce. I had really over 30 years, you get a lot of good experience. And so my my experience in food safety is not as an expert, but my paths cross so often between the quality side and the safety side. As you know, we talked about this. I thought maybe it'd be a good discussion because I see things that others may not see, and you have a bunch of folks here that probably will correct me if I get something wrong. So not being a safety guru, but being a quality guy. So that's my perspective that I'm coming from.
Nice. And you're getting tons of love here in the comments, Joe. People are like, holy crap, is this the Juran Quality Handbook? Same guy? So
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. I forgot to mention the books. So
Yeah.
Dr. Juran started the first quality handbook in 1951. It was called the Juran Quality Control Handbook, and it kept about every 8 to 10 years. It got upgraded and changed. The first one he wrote by himself, and then we started to get co-authors over the years, and then we stuck with, as the Institute grew in the 90s, we did it as each of us did a chapter. But then and then Blanton Godfrey was my previous boss. He's now dean at North Carolina State and the chairman on the board of American Society for Quality. He's a retired guy. He did co-edit it with Dr. Juran, and then when he left the Institute, I then took over the co-editing, and then Dr. Juran passed. So then I did the last edition on my own. It's 1,200 pages. It's a compendium of all things quality. And we do have safety in it too, because my good friend, Len Heflick, who came out of the food safety side, actually did the risk management chapter in there. And then I found that it's very hard to carry a 1,200 page book around. So I have a book on Six Sigma called Six Sigma Breakthrough and Beyond. Talk about that, came out about 15 years ago. But then the Quality Essentials for Leaders is a small handbook on those basic things that people need to know. But yeah, we're the Juran guys.
Wow, super impressive, man. It just, yeah. And this is what's so cool about the chat, is being able to bring on experts such as yourself to talk about topics. And definitely the audience here is showing their excitement as well too. So let's dive in. So one of the things that I think gets a lot of confusion, Joe, and it's as you were talking about, is food quality versus food safety, and they're completely different things, aren't they?
They are, but yet people tend to confuse them. I'll try to look at it this way. If you think about it from the perspective of the consumer, you could have a horrible tasting product that's safe. So that's kind of how I start my discussion, is that how satisfied is your customer with those things that they purchased? So obviously the value, the taste, the convenience, the ease of producing, ease of cooking, if it's something like that. And so when people say, well, isn't quality and the safety the same? I say, well, no, because of those reasons, that there are things that are different that the customer decides is quality. Although having that safe product is essential. Number zero is a number baseline. So you got to make it safe and good to meet the customer needs. So that product has to be fit for the use of that person, whatever it is, whether it's cheese or snacks or whatever. And also the standards associated with them are, yes, we both have standards. One is, one is the FDA, one is the, maybe the International Association or international guidelines on ISO. But the standards are different, but yet the same, because they're both standards. They both have audit. They both have documents and procedures. So people think, oh, they're one and the same. But no, what we talk about with safety and what we talk about quality are different things. And therefore, we have to make sure that we're safe and good.
Yep. Perfect summary. And there are expectations that the consumer has for a product. So like, with our coffee this morning and everything else, there are flavor notes, and we dial in as consumers on that level of bitterness and the roast and these type of things that we enjoy with our coffee, whether we like half and half in it or not. And what does the half and half look like when you're pouring the half? All of these things go to that experience of what the consumer expects. And I think a big challenge then, Joe, for companies is, how do you get that information? Because we've seen colossal mistakes in the past, New Coke, right? These type of things where companies thought that they knew what quality was, and then it blew up in their face. How do companies get this information?
Yeah, and the most essential part about the whole quality movement that changed from when I was a rookie in business in 1980 to the quality revolution, which happened around 1988, 86 to 88, was that the one single thing that the Japanese did differently, because they had to compete worldwide differently after World War II, was understand what the customer's needs were and try to produce product to meet their needs.
Wow.
That became the heart of quality management, is that what is the voice of the customer? And if we understand their voice and we meet their needs with most of what they're wanting, they'll buy our product.
Mm-hmm.
Over the last 30 years, the means to get the voice of the customer has changed, and the importance of it has stayed the same. So today, I won't go back to, years ago, that the absence of real voice of the customer leads to product disasters, meaning the product doesn't sell like we expected it to. And then we tend to be scientific driven or technical driven, meaning someone in the organization says, hey, I got this new idea or this new concept. Let's push it out to the customer. Well, that pushing of design over the wall and stuff doesn't work well unless you know what the customer wants. Today, we've got so many means of understanding the customer behavior through social media, through monitoring what they buy, how they buy it, through touch aisles in supermarkets and stores, that we have so much information, almost scary information, about what we like. Now, that in the aggregate gets you good information, but you still have regional and local people. So if you don't have some contact with customers, you're never going to truly have understanding that, what are the voice of the customer. It's like, if I go into the deli and I order, some meat or a sandwich to be cut, I'm talking right there with the butcher, or I'm talking right there with the person. I could tell them after I eat it, I didn't like it or I liked it. The feedback is both. When you're producing, food products and you're away from the delivery, it's very hard to get that contact. So understanding the voice of the customer, understanding their needs, and developing products for them is essential. And a lot of times that's not done. They tend to, we design products because we're food engineers. We can come up with something good. Or we know that people right now are, low fat conscious or low cholesterol conscious or keto conscious. And so let's make stuff for them, but yet not really understanding what it is that those customers want. So, but I will tell you this, the food industry probably in the last, 10 years has gotten much better at making product to meet customer needs than it was before.
Yeah, and that's a fantastic summary, because that's kind of the way I viewed my career working in quality control and quality assurance, is that sales and marketing come up with ideas, R&D figures out how to manufacture it, you do your market research, figure out if it's correct, and then it goes to the manufacturing side. And my job was to maintain that standard. And the more I understood about what it was that the consumers wanted, the better and easier it was for me to maintain that standard, because a lot of these things are in some ways difficult to measure. So if a consumer, has, like with a beverage or something like that, there's a particular texture, a creaminess to that they like. I need to understand that, so that if I'm doing product evaluations in the plant and doing studies and shelf life and these type of things, that I understand that standard and make sure that we don't cross that line. Because as we were talking about when we were doing our prep for the show as well, is quality never changes in giant chunks, right? It kind of gets chipped away a little bit at a time. And then after a period of time, people will go back to that product and be like, oh my God, this is horrible. What happened? Right? It's those little chipping away that happens.
And also continuously defining what those words mean in some measurement format. So for instance, one of my quality management is also converting that voice into a technical spec, that once we make it, the ingredients, it tastes like what they asked for, if it's just a food product. So measurement is really important. So what do we measure that guarantees that texture is there? And I recall working in a sauce company early on in my career, like 30 years ago. and we were tasting, competitive sauces, and it was early morning, and we had bread and we had cooked sauce, and we're tasting the sauce, and of course I'm comparing it to what I'm used to, and everybody around the table is comparing it, and everything tasted good or tasted different to everybody else. So the question is, how do you guarantee one type that you make is going to meet the most of the customers? And that you have to get down to measuring the ingredients and how you do that. So for instance, a good example of measurement in food and how important it is the hotness of a pepper, right? So, Taco Bell, Chipotle, and all these Mexican style places want, people go there because one of the ingredients is pepper, and various peppers have various heat associated with it, and temperature and pain levels. And so you can't be too hot, spicy, people burn, and you can't be too weak, people won't buy it. So they had to figure out how to measure the hotness of a pepper. And this is good, 30 years ago, and they came up with a mechanism to monitor. It's basically a liquid at the time was liquid chromatography, where they actually would measure, the element that makes the hotness of the pepper. And so now we could test peppers, sort them, and make the products hot, medium, soft. And then another one was, how do you make sure that frozen vegetables, when they're unfrozen, are still palatable and moist? And there became a pea tenderometer. They measure the moisture of peas before they put it into the freezer. And so you have to come up with, maybe sometimes develop a measuring device beyond the normal sensors to find some, happy median for all your customers.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, so you develop these tools and the Scoville scale for hotness on the peppers and these types of things. But even then, Joe, it varies by region, because I have lots of relatives who live in the Midwest in Iowa. And what I consider spicy would kill them, right? They think ketchup is spicy. And you have to be able to then understand that baseline of what the consumers, even within different submarkets within these areas, are looking for. Because the person in Arizona who thinks something is spicy is going to be very different than the person in Massachusetts. So it's an interesting side on that too.
And that's one of my experiences and stories was that even though you're still measuring the hotness of the pepper, you have to understand the hotness as it relates to your customer. Because one thing about pepper, the more you eat it, the more you get accustomed to the heat. So the customer needs aren't changing necessarily, but they're adjusting to that temperature more and more.
Right.
And so you have to then be able to move it around the country.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Good point. Yeah. So you need to have these tools to be able to measure it and create attributes and things that you can actually take a look at and rank against each other and stabilize, and then use that data to understand what the market is interpreting. That super important.
So the summary of that is, once you know the needs and convert it to some kind of technical requirement, then you have to measure that to maintain it and then adjust it. So the whole concept of quality and design, which is understanding customer requirements as you're designing it, and then quality and operations, which are quality control, maintaining it, and then as they change, quality improvement. And that's the basis for managing quality. And that's also the similarity to managing safety. We make sure that we design safe, we make sure that we produce safe, and then we monitor what safe means over time. So we keep changing that.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. I remember early on, so my main background is CPG and dairy products and things like that, which was awesome because I love cheese. And I remember early in my career, we would do cuttings. So we would develop new products, and R&D would do a big, show and tell. All the executives would come to the tasting with the CEO and everybody else. And the CEO had it in his mind that he was the determining person. And he would taste the cheeses and go, all right, that one's good. And then everybody would kind of agree with him. And then you move on to the next product. Nobody ever contradicted him. And I sat back and watched that. And I'm just like, no, we're not selling product for CEOs. This is terrible. This is a terrible way to understand what the consumers want and what we should be producing.
And yet we still miss the mark many times because corporate pressure takes over, or cost pressures take over and you slip, and then the customer always corrects you.
Yeah.
The customer will always correct you. Over time, they will correct you. I wanted to respond to somebody's comment over here. A couple of really great comments. We also have someone from Taiwan here too.
Yeah.
This young lady said that the quality handbook. Why is it called the handbook? Although she compliments it because it's so big. I could easily say Dr. Juran had really big hands back then. She said it should be called an encyclopedia. Interestingly, engineering handbooks were always about 3-4 inches wide because they wanted everything in one place. You got to think about before technology, right? We had encyclopedias, but if you can't carry a set around, so you get it all in one book. But I tried to reduce that in my publication because times have changed and you can get things electronic, et cetera. And I'm like, if we want the handbook to be carried around, we got to make it in parts or smaller.
Yeah.
Well, we got a big backlash from customers that they want. There's a set of customers who wanted it in that way. So luckily we have digital handbook today, but that's why it's so big. But I'd love to see it in 3 sections, or just smaller because it's just so massive. But I have to edit those 1,200 pages too. And so thank you for your comment and compliment. And there's also a person here, Austin. He says an interesting story recently about Chipotle salsa, and people started to complain about the heat level. Come to find out, they had changed their sourcing peppers from a different region, and then it created a hotter pepper. And this is a classic example of not really understanding your food chain, and in this case, really a food chain, and your sourcing. That whether it's outsourcing a metal part to a different supplier or outsourcing peppers. I recently bought peppers and I said, "Are these hot?" He goes, "I don't know. You'll have to test them and try it because they're varying. They're varying. That grocery store isn't separating." So, but as a customer, you've got to be able to do that. So that's classic supply chain, and I bet people didn't buy it because of that.
Yeah. Well, and part of this too, right? And that's a great comment from Austin, in that sometimes too, companies become victims of their own success, because when you become huge, like Chipotle or Starbucks or something like this, sourcing becomes very difficult because now you're buying up all the peppers or you're buying up all the coffee beans. And I'm kind of curious on this side, Joe. One of the stories I've always heard with Starbucks is people complain and say, "Oh my goodness, Starbucks coffee is so burnt. I don't like the burnt taste." And I've heard that Starbucks does that on purpose because they want to mask flavors for different varieties. And by over roasting the coffee, they help to standardize that coffee and make it more of the same. Is that true, or what do you think?
Well, I don't know if the facts are true, but I know the story is true. Meaning, I heard the CEO of Starbucks at one point when someone asked him that, people complain that your coffee is bitter and sometimes tastes burnt. He said, "That's not true." And I said, "It's not true. It's not bitter. It's not burnt." But it didn't matter. That's the customers were saying anyway. But my guess is that, their bold coffee, which I'm a bold drinker, and then their medium, and then their light roast are there for a reason, right? So that people want it a certain way. But based on their sales and growth, I think the CEO at least understands his customers enough. But yeah, an example, I'll give you a similar example. Toyota was making cars so quiet in the 90s that people were forgetting to turn them off. And so they had to design noise into the muffler system so that people could hear that the car was running. And that's a design to reflect the benefit of quality, which we got quieter. However, the negative side was people were forgetting to turn off their car, so they made it a little noisy. That's a true story. And so I'm going to guess it's similar to what you said about Starbucks, is that over roasting the beans gives it a different taste, and that satisfies some market level.
Yeah, and that comment from the Starbucks CEO is that's bad thinking, right? To have him sit there and say, no, the consumer is wrong. That's
yeah, he didn't use those words, but that was my interpretation. But
yeah.
He's obviously right in some regard. He keeps doing the right things. So, and who am I?
Right,
who am I to tell him?
Yeah, but
otherwise.
we've seen plenty of large companies who no longer are large food companies because they made those type of mistakes.
Well, the
They got,
example you mentioned, the CEO of your company mentioned that taste. It says this is my taste.
yeah,
Um, I'll tell you an opposite of that. I was in. I'm going to use the name. It was great because it's a good story. Barilla Pasta. I was in Italy at the Barilla factory and met one of the owners of Barilla. And you think about store-bought pasta, you think about it as processed pasta and this and that. And I asked him, I said, "How do you know if your pasta is any good?" He says, "It's only good if my children will eat it. And so
mm,
any kind of new design we have, I bring it home to my children. If they don't eat it, it can't be good." But at least he was going to the customers, he's saying it's got to be safe and good for my children.
right.
If it's not, I'm not going to offer it to anyone else's children. And
Hmm.
so that's another way a CEO can actually be very strong on the brand and very good on it. The topic you have though with safety is that we keep talking about measuring customer needs, understanding customer needs, measuring them, making technical specs, and all that is good. But you can't do that in the absence of safety,
Mm,
meaning it's safe and the production of it's safe because people don't get to go into food factories that often and processing food, and there's a lot of danger in these places. Danger of either getting hurt because there's a lot of equipment, or danger of creating bacterial uh, lid-ridden products or airborne products with airborne bacteria. And so to be safe and get the quality of the product the customers want is not an easy task uh,
right.
for these businesses. So that's why you kind of need to focus on both of those. And if someone says, well, do we need quality management and safety management? And Dr. Juran always taught us a pretty good lesson on that was, do you need finance management? They don't make anything, right? Why do we have financial management? Well, to make sure that we have the right budgets, we plan right, we make sure that we control what we plan, we spend right, and over time we make improvements.
Hmm.
So think about it that way, that there's a function that's required to do something different from the other function. Even though we all have a responsibility for safety, we all have a responsibility for quality, and we all have a responsibility for finance, but there are functional people that have to do certain things.
Right. No,
And one is
I love that. That's a great story. Um, to kind of build on your point then too, Joe, is that a lot of times, and we're seeing, this big explosion in new entrepreneurial products and plant-based meats and all these type of things. And a lot of times the entrepreneurs that are going to these spaces are not food safety or quality professionals. They're marketing people or entrepreneurs or R&D people out there trying new things, and they're developing these new products. And then the food safety piece of it comes later, right? So they find something that works, and then they're like, oh, crap, this is pretty neutral pH, and we're canning this, and oh geez, I never really thought about botulism before. And now they got a big problem.
it's similar in the wine industry right now. The wine, you may not know this, but the taste and the consumer wants sweeter wines.
Mm,
Well, what happens when you get sweeter wines? You're a food guy, you
yeah,
know?
get a nice food source there. Yeah.
Right. So you got now you're dealing with, now you built probably 50, 60 years of factories based on dry wines and
Hmm.
uh, various less sweet wines, and now they're making them sweeter. So what are they seeing? Seeing more bacteria problems in the manufacturer and in the delivery. And unfortunately, you have to get rid of all the bottles. So the change in, the change, or that your example of a little small startup that makes a product based on, satisfying a local region and then wants to expand nationally and realizes that product is not going to be at the same level of quality because you can't get the quantity frequently enough to go big. And all of a sudden they got to tinker with that ingredient now. So scaling in food industry is a very difficult thing too, because of those reasons, because you're going to be scaling your supply base to places where you can't control anymore.
Right.
And that may be outside of the United States where they don't have those controls. And all of a sudden you're bringing risk into, your environment, of which was a really good product. And I see a lot of, I there's a lot of local breweries popping up all over the place. One of the reasons why a lot of them shut down, they can't get the hops.
Mm.
They're growing and growing, and all of a sudden they can't get enough hops for their style beer. So they either don't make that beer or shut down. So the demand has been created, without any real recognition of the supply of hops for beer. And it's been a real dilemma for some of them, particularly in the US.
Huh, that's interesting. Yeah, I didn't know
Be a
that.
beer drinker, start growing hops in your backyard.
Well, it's like here in Colorado, so lots of craft brewers here as well, but also things like new markets like marijuana, right? So these things become legal, and then you have people making food and putting THC and CBD and all these different chemicals in these foods strictly as a delivery vehicle, and they don't even necessarily understand how to make food safely. They're just making products for the the effect. So that's a real danger as well.
You mentioned the marijuana industry. So Connecticut is open smoking state now, and I heard the other day that the growth of stores is so fast, but the people running them are so inexperienced. The state is granting $1 million in training to train the owners of the pot stores so that they can understand business. It's like telling that local baker food safety. It's just same thing. Yeah, it's like the cart before the horse. We're selling the pot, we're making money like crazy, but we have no concept of how to run a business.
Right.
And so you see a lot of them also go out of business.
Yep, definitely.
They don't have that experience, which then also creates an opportunity for someone to start franchising, somebody taking over. So,
yeah, and then hopefully finding a good model for that. So with the quality piece, and this is something. So in the food manufacturing industry, one of the things managing and monitoring quality is kind of a challenge, because a lot of the technical things that we manage internally, so pH or solids or things like this, don't necessarily translate into what the consumer is telling you. So in my past, that's one of the things that we struggled with. And it was also the realization that if you're going to be making sure that you're keeping an eye on the quality of the product, you need to look at the manufacturing process and determine where can you actually manage that. Because once it's finished product, Joe, it's in the boxes in the warehouse, it's a done deal. So where can you do that? And one of the things that we figured out in the past is when we were making like soy milk and things like this, is the only point that you can really make sure that you're producing the product that has those attributes that you're looking at is the batching phase. All right. So you're throwing all the ingredients in the mixing tank and doing these type of things. And so we put controls in place for the quality side of thing. And they would pull samples from those tanks and look at it and smell it and do these type of things to make sure that those quality attributes that we had found from the consumer were being followed correctly. One of the things for soy milk, as an example, that consumers really hate is if it's got what they call beanie, if it's got too much of that soy aroma and taste. People are like, I don't like that, which is why in a lot of these plant-based beverage spaces, you see highly flavored and sugared drinks, is because they're masking a lot of those attributes that the consumer doesn't like. And so you need to understand those and control them at that point.
And so here, once again, you've separated the understanding of quality versus safety. There's safe products, even though you smell the soy, but it's not meeting the customer need. So you have to manage that. And obviously mostly food is, batching and mixing. And so it's early in the process, and you can't control the raw material you can't check every bag of flour for every granular flour. So your first choice is when you obviously you get it from a good source, it's been within a range, but you can't you can't see it work until you're batching or mixing and see how it goes. Right. And a good example of that is, what you see in the store as a consumer is success. But to get that success, there's remixing and rebatching. And that's the cost of poor quality, in a sense that if you did it right the first time. However, when it comes to mixing and batching, you may not get it right the first time because there's so many different ingredients, all going together. And one day my aunt asked me, she goes, I don't like the bread I'm making anymore. It's just not the same. I said, it's because the flour is not the same as it was 30 years ago. The flour today is very different than you had 30 years ago. So your bread's going to be different. And that's what essentially happens, when you're batching and mixing, is that you do that to blend. So you get it, same thing to do with wines now. You can't get, everything blending, and then some blends become a wine in itself, like a Meritage, it's leftover wine.
Yeah, exactly. And in the wine industry, people people think that there's a winery and they've got a little patch and then they get their grapes and they produce their wine. No. As you get larger, right?
That's what you do at home.
Yeah. So the buying and selling and trading and figuring out which grapes are going to give you that attribute that you're looking with your particular brand, huge behind the scenes activities in the wine industry that the public doesn't even know about.
And not only that, there's certain requirements that you have to have your wine called a certain thing. Like if you want a Napa wine, I think it's 25%, only up to 25% of the grapes can come from outside of Napa. So 75% of the grape has been Napa. And it's, different from regions around the world. So you have to, obviously, if you have a Napa wine, you want grapes from Napa because that's the whole point. But if you don't know that, so you have to blend. You have to make sure because the cost of the grapes in Napa are probably a lot more than they are in Southern California. So they tend to blend. And now when people say, oh, we want to be able to get more grape outside of Napa because it's cheaper, all of a sudden you got a question about the quality of your wines.
Right. Well, and different regions around the world, AOCs, so Bordeaux and Chateau Neufs and things like this, where they really clamp down on that to control that and keep those wines unique to those areas. So that's a whole topic.
You like cheese. The Parmesan is trying to do the same thing.
Oh yeah.
Parmesan is trying to get the clarification that you can only get Parmesan in Parmesan, Italy.
Right.
The rest of it is just cheese.
Exactly. Yeah. So champagne versus sparkling white wine, right? All these type of things.
So you have this great list of people here chatting online, and I'm just curious: do they see conflict within their organizations, because they look like they're good food people, within their organizations between the safety people and the quality people? And maybe they could shed some comments on that, or maybe you can respond to that from some of your past shows that you've done.
Yeah, absolutely. So everybody, please, this is a great opportunity, Joe, to ask him questions. I mean, a world leading expert in this area, so definitely fire away with your questions. And I would say, so generally in food companies, so the food safety and the food quality falls under one person, one area of authority. So for example, I ran quality at White Wave Foods, and I had different directors who managed different functions within those areas. And really then the overlap for maintaining those attributes, we would work really closely on design control with the R&D groups to make sure that those attributes and what they were looking at were translating over correctly. But I really didn't see a lot of conflict on those areas. But I did see conflict in this particular area, is that sometimes within companies, you'll have political things as well. So in the past, I had an experience, Joe, where there was a new product that was launched and it was made to spec and everything was done correctly, but the consumers didn't like it. So they didn't do a good job with their market research, and the product was failing. And so we would do product cuttings at corporate and bring in all the different groups. And the people who were feeling a lot of pressure for the lack of performance from the product would start bad mouthing the product. So we would do the cuttings, and the marketing guy would say, this product is terrible. This isn't what we wanted. This is awful. And so I would ask them what they were talking about and try and get more information to see if we were doing something wrong on the manufacturing side. And we weren't. So it took me a little while to figure out that that's what was going on, is he was trying to shift blame from his group to the operational group. So sometimes you have these political things that happen within companies relative to products.
Absolutely. And there's actually there's a museum. There's a museum in upstate New York for failed products. And I understand it's going to be on display now in New York City. And I'll give you just one example that, I don't know how long we want to go here, but think about this product designed without the clear understanding of customer needs. And that was black licorice toothpaste. that that left black looking teeth.
Oh my God.
And that was a product that was in the Museum of Failed Products. And if you think about that, it's like, well, great concept. The black licorice toothpaste tastes great, but it's still black on white teeth. It's a problem. Another one was um, a can of a self cooking can of soup for backpackers who are hiking.
Okay.
Unfortunately, it weighed about 8 pounds. So very heavy, so it didn't do well there. So that's in there. So we have this tendency to the pressure you referred to, and the need for sales and the need for profitability to create things that may look good on paper and just doesn't work right in the marketplace, because really it's not meeting the need of the customer, it's meeting the need of the business customer. And that's why the balancing act between the needs of the business and the needs of the customer always have to be there. And if the customer needs don't win, then the short-term gain the business gets usually is offset by the long-term failure of losing customers.
Right. And that's a really good point, because I mean, sometimes within companies, the R&D and the marketing groups, they're there to innovate and come up with new ideas, and they're getting pressure. And so there's always this desire that I've seen within companies, Joe, of creating more and more products. It's like, oh, okay, let's do this special product and let's do that, and we'll create this new configuration. And it just adds this incredible complexity within operations.
I remember a couple of the tea industry when it went to sweet teas and all the different flavors of teas.
Oh.
And you had typically of a dry leaf tea going through the machines. And now you got the sugar going through, binding up and getting moisture and binding up. Or all these multi-flavored vodkas, gins, all these multi-flavors now. You had one flavor, one plant, pump it out in different sizes. Now what do? You got to, even if you're running similar lines, you got to clean them out. You got downtime. You got all this. So customers don't see the complexity, and nor, if you apply the Pareto principle, which you safety guys may not know this, Dr. Juran actually named the Pareto principle the Pareto principle.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he actually is the one that gave the name the Pareto principle to the 80-20 rule. But if you think about it, if you offer 10 different flavors of vodka, 2 of them are going to outsell the other 8. Right. And so now you got a business decision to make. Do we compete with multi flavors, or we focus on the 2 that give us the biggest bang for the buck? And that's all products are like that. All the chips and all the stores. And you see a lot of options today, and we're seeing more international options. They're because you transport them quicker, better, safer.
Yeah, hopefully so. But one of the ones that I watch all the time from a safety side is enoki mushrooms. And oh my goodness, it's like that. Those mushrooms, for whatever reason, are being imported a lot. And listeria, lots of issues with listeria. So everybody who listens to this, I don't eat enoki mushrooms, high risk. But back on the topic then, relative to these different products, is that 80-20 rule. Yeah, it totally applies. And a lot of times when companies launch new products, you'll get cannibalization. And people have been buying your brand, and you launch a new product, and they just switch from one flavor to another. So what did you really gain by doing that? You're just feeding one and starving another. So how does that actually help?
It's and Kimberly here has a point here about when she lived in Massachusetts. She was invited to a local small business monthly meeting to discuss food safety for local folks who were thinking of opening up a restaurant. Food safety professionals need to reach out to local chambers, city and county business associations, because just having a restaurant without understanding health importance, preventing illness, helping protect investments, there's a lot going on, and you could just get shut down quickly with food. We see a lot of foods. I live in Connecticut. I see a lot of food companies, food stores opening up, shutting down, opening up, shutting down. Yeah. My guess is that there's something hidden that they didn't know about, like what the customer.
Absolutely. So to Kimberly's point too, right? And it's funny because you'll have these celebrity chefs and things like this who do YouTube videos and things like this, Joe. And there's actually an entire cottage industry of people who then analyze those videos to show all the food safety mistakes that these guys make. So cross-contamination on cutting boards and these type of things. And these guys are chefs, right? They're experts who have been doing this their entire careers, and they're making these basic food safety mistakes on shows.
And it's funny, I was a wood shop teacher in high school. And so safety glasses. And so I watch shows on TV where they don't wear safety glasses. And I'm appalled, because safety glasses don't evidently look good when you're on camera, but, they're sticking their head in a table saw, or they're grinding metal or something, and there's no safety glasses or gloves when they're taking something hot out. It's just, I do the same thing, but I didn't realize people were looking at it from that point of view. That's really interesting, because if you did that in your factory, you'd be shut down.
Yeah.
But they could do it on TV, and everybody's imitating it at home, and nobody shuts them down. They might get sick.
Yeah, that reminds me. I took a graphic class in high school, and so we had the big printing presses and everything. It was super cool. And the guy that taught the class was missing 2 fingers because he got them stuck in the machinery at different points.
So if you're in the business of tools like that. So I had in high school, I ran this thumb up a bandsaw. So I sliced that. And in the last 10 years, I did something stupid, and I drilled through a piece of wood and went through my thigh. And of course the drill was still there, and I had to get it out. So grin and bear it. They had to back out the drill. 30 years ago, they didn't have reverse drills. I wouldn't have been able to do that. So yeah, it's a pretty hazardous. Safety is among us. Probably the biggest overlap between safety and quality is risk management. If you have a risk management or a risk assessment, you don't differentiate between quality and safety. You just said there's a risk of contamination, there's a risk of this, and people fight over whether it should be in quality or safety. It doesn't matter. If there's a risk, there's a risk. Mitigate it.
Right.
And that's probably the biggest overlap, because great design products that are high risk are going to cost you more in the end than those that aren't. You're willing to take that risk, but if you're not willing to manage that risk, then you're really messed up. So the risk management, which has been now part of the quality management standard, is another area where people kind of collide these days. And it's like, well, there's a risk of having contamination, and that's a quality risk. Well, yeah, but the safety guys, it's a major safety issue.
Yeah.
Well, let's not fight over who owns it. Let's just make sure we don't have it happen here.
Yeah, no, good point. So as people are thinking about how do we control quality attributes, making sure the voice of the consumer is located in the product, what are some good tools, Joe, that you've seen for companies to do that?
Well, you have to really break down your level of maturity. So the absolute greatest mechanism of understanding the voice of the customer is monitoring behavior in the environment the consumer is using it in. So that means, that means talking to people who cook in their homes, talking to restaurateurs who cook in their restaurants. So that is the ultimate best, is observed behavior at the location. Now, we can't do that for many. So then we have to say, what's the next best thing? And that's the collective response from those people. So what someone in marketing research has got to monitor what they're buying, what are the ingredients they're buying. So all that today on the mature end is monitoring it through AI and social media. That's monitoring habits and then publishing them habits, and you allowing to interpret them. So you're seeing a lot of big data analytics there. But the focus group is the single biggest opportunity to talk directly with people and observe behavior. And then you move up from there. The surveys, the questionnaires, the point of sale discussions with folks, but those get you limited numbers. And so today people are moving up that chain and saying, aggregately, what is the population of men, women, age, culture, nationality? What are they, and how they got that information there was coming through all these channels that are out there. And some of it's pretty phenomenal data, but you still have to then interpret that data in your business.
Right.
But I
Yeah.
think you'll see
Wow.
if you're a large company, you talk to your marketing people, they're probably using a lot of their social media to determine likes and dislikes.
Well, and the AI piece, I mean, yeah, we're all talking about AI right now. Being able to plug into that technology and analyze what people are actually doing and saying, because part of this in analyzing consumer preferences and attributes and things like this is people aren't always honest, right? If someone calls me on the phone and says, "Hey, we're doing a survey on healthy habits that people have," um, am I going to say I'm a fat, lazy slob who lays around and never exercises? No, of course not. I'm going to tell the guy that I exercise religiously 6 days a week and I watch what I eat.
That's why observation, you can't lie, right?
Exactly.
It's like
Um,
it's
yeah.
the other thing, medical survey, they need medical patients for testing and stuff. And they'll ask, says, if you're an obese person over the age of 65 who have trouble sleeping at night, we have a test for you. Well, guess who that shows up? Not skinny people. It's just like that's the group. But there's value that comes out of that after. But yeah, people lie. It's what they don't lie about? They don't lie about things they hate.
Mm.
Most consumers will not lie about things that they dislike. They'll be flat. This is there was a really popular in the early 2000s, which was most people would look at customer satisfaction, the likes. And there's another side of that, the customer dissatisfaction, the dislikes. But the importance of dissatisfaction was much greater than satisfaction, because dissatisfaction, people leave and buy something else. Customer satisfaction, if you miss on it, they just wait till the next product comes out and you taste it. So if you look at dissatisfied consumers, they are very clear as to why they didn't buy your product. People who are satisfied are not clear why they like your product. So like you said, the Starbucks thing, it's bitter. I didn't like it. I'm not going to go there anymore. Or it's too expensive. Or, I don't like waiting in line, or whatever it is. And so they're very specific. And so focusing on what people dislike can actually give you more information than focusing on what people like, because they're very clear about it.
That's
if you
super
ask,
important.
if you said, how many, I did this little survey, how many hours a week do you exercise? None. And now if you said, why don't you exercise? So I'm too freaking busy. Yeah. Now, that's important to you, and I'm busy. So if I'm busy sitting down working 12 hours a day, how can you help me by giving me a product that works? And so what you find is that, they have programs that, get up for 5 minutes and do this, do that. But my honesty came because I could tell you what I dislike. And I won't lie. Why would I lie about it? I just don't like it.
Yeah.
About satisfiers.
That's very profound, and it's so simple and elegant. And so definitely I want to make sure and emphasize that so that people understand what we just talked about, right? And we see this as consumers ourselves. People, I think generally you hear that people will complain 10 times more than, someone who's happy with the product. And a lot of times in quality control, quality assurance within groups, right, we have to take care of complaints and these type of things. And we look at it as, geez, I got all these complaints. But actually, to your point, Joe, that's a gold mine, right? The consumers are telling you what they want you to do with the product and what they don't like. And you have to understand that if you're going to, number one, survive in the food industry, and if you want to grow and thrive, you have to understand that.
Right.
There's a really good show I'm watching on Netflix, the Foods That Built America, and it's fantastic. So they're going through H.J. Heinz and Kraft and all these innovators in the food space. And the common theme, and I think this really kind of plays into our conversation today, is they were solving a problem. They were solving complaints. So with H.J. Heinz, the reason there were sauces and there was different types of ketchup that weren't made from tomatoes, people were buying these sauces to cover up the taste of the rancid meat that they had to buy because there wasn't any refrigeration. And everything was local and regional. And H.J. Heinz came up with a way to mass produce a tomato ketchup and sell it across the country. Same thing with Kraft. Cheese was getting moldy and nasty way, way too soon. So he came up with new ways to manufacture cheese where it would last longer. They were solving complaints in the marketplace.
Dr. Juran always told us, as we were always saying, how do we get new customers? To try to understand the problems that people face and solve it.
Yeah.
And that's what they were doing. And for instance, people talk, you hear the stories of M&Ms, why M&Ms were created and why gum was created. They were all created to fill a gap somewhere. Like I don't know the story about M&Ms, but M&Ms was made for the military so they'd have a quick source of sugar, but it doesn't melt in your hand. That whole story.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting that when you hear why something was made, it was solving that problem. And they're successful products. Think about it too. They last.
Yeah.
They don't last years. They last decades.
Yep, definitely. Well, we're kind of getting to the end of our time here. This has been a fantastic conversation. So let's kind of bring this back up to the 30,000 foot level here, Joe, and summarize. What are some of the key points or key thoughts you'd like to leave our audience with today?
One is that the quality function and the safety function are both required, necessary, and look similar, but they're different. And that trilogy that I mentioned to you, which we call the Juran trilogy, that if you want to manage quality, you do it with quality design, quality control, quality improvement. Although maybe the tools you use are things different than that, but they're basic function. But safety is done the same way. Safety design, safety improve, quality, safety control, safety improvement is number two. Number three, many of the tools you use, like understanding the major safety issues, have a Pareto effect. It's like the quality issues, Pareto effect. If we wanted to understand what's causing some of our safety problems, we use 5 whys and cause and effect. So tools flip-flop, but the function is different. And we both should be trying to strive to put ourselves out of business, in the sense that I've never seen a company lose a safety member or a quality member even at 0 failures, because they didn't get to 0 failures alone. They got there because of the function. And last, I want to offer your audience here that if they send me an email, I will send them a PDF copy of the book, the handbook.
Oh, wow.
A couple of folks here would like a copy and they don't know where to get it. I'll make sure they get a PDF.
Well, that's awesome. I want one of those. I'm going to be putting that in.
You send me the emails, whoever wants it, I'll make sure you get one.
Let's put your email here in the comments, if that's okay, Joe. What's your email?
Yeah, so you put Juran.com, just put jdefeo @Juran.com. So J-D-E-F-E-O, just like my spelling, but the letter J, D-E-F-E-O @Juran.com, and that'll come directly to me.
There we go.
One of the things we do at Juran is when Dr. Juran was alive, people say, I'd like to speak to Dr. Juran. And we said, just call him. What do you mean call him? He said, call him, see what happens. So we give him the number, he calls him, he says, Juran here. He never had anybody answer his phone.
Nice.
Now, he won't spend 10 minutes on the phone with you, but he would always answer. So send me an email. I'll get it right out to you. And this has been fun. This is the first time with this format. I like the fact that your comments come in and, you could chat with people versus in a webinar. People prevent the webinars from the comments to come in, and people are kind of afraid. There's 70, 80 people out there, and they don't want to have their comments out. It's good.
It is, absolutely. And so with that, we'll close out our chat for today. And Joe, I wanted to really thank you. This has been a fantastic chat. Love to have you back on at some point here in the future. And your contributions, I think the comments on here speak for themselves within the areas of safety and quality and management and all these activities that we all get intertwined with. Just amazing. So thank you very much for that.
Oh, I got one plug. We do monthly webinars that are free. And next week I have a webinar that I do. I do them all. I'm the voice. But we've been focusing on the digital technologies that impact quality management, quality 4.0. And some of that will apply to safety folks, because there's tools that are impacting you as well. Matter of fact, here's something you might want to know. So next week's session is about picking a quality management system software. Ooh. Many of the quality management system software developers previously had environmental health and safety software. Now they've added quality to it. So they're actually moving into the quality space with things that you already had. So next week's episode is about how to pick the right configuration for yourself.
So Julie was asking for the email again. So Julie, that's in the comments, jdefeo @Juran.com. So that'll be in there, and you can send him a note. I'm going to, for sure. So
I don't know where Fort Lupton is. Do you?
No, I mean, there's a Fort Lupton here in Colorado. I think it's where Julie's at. We spoke
Fort
before.
Lupton. Nice.
Yep. Very pretty.
Well,
So
I appreciate your candor and your good facilitation. Look
oh,
forward to doing
absolutely.
it again sometime in the future.
Excellent conversation. Thanks again, Joe. Enjoy your weekend, and everybody, thank you again for joining us. We do this for you, and this has been a fantastic conversation. So have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy your time, and we'll see you back here next Friday at the same time. So 8 a.m. Mountain, 10 a.m. Eastern, and we'll have another fantastic chat. So thanks again, Joe. Enjoy your weekend.
Thank you. Bye-bye, Bryan.
Bye, everyone.